I told you I'm going to record this, so if anybody's gone or if you need to rewatch it, you got it.
Is it already recording?
It's recording right now.
Hello, person who could not be bothered to join us right now.
Is everybody here?
No, not everybody's here.
Oh, hi, Rebecca.
Okay, so here we go. Area of a parallelogram. I'm going to write area of a parallelogram is the base times the height. This is true of any parallelogram. So rectangles work, squares work, rhombus works, any parallelogram works for that. And the reason why is if you can kind of envision taking like this triangle here and just shifting it. You're probably really used to like area of a rectangle from previous math classes. Do you see that you can take this triangle and just locate it back over there? And it has that same length of the base and the same height. It works for any parallelogram. Area of a parallelogram is base times height. Area of a triangle, what is that? Half a base times height. And the reason that is true is because it's just a triangle can be represented as half of a parallelogram. Then like rotate that triangle over here. You have a parallelogram. So this triangle is just half of that base times that height. So the base and the height, maybe you make a little note of this. These two have to be perpendicular. It's true of this one also. The base and the height have to be perpendicular to each other. So sometimes they'll give you both of those numbers. Other times they won't, and you might have to calculate something. But the base and the height will always be perpendicular. So we reviewed these in the warm-up today, but the Pythagorean theorem, just keep in mind, is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You'll have to use that for some of the problems. Special right triangles. Maybe you just draw a little reminder of each one of those. So if you have a 45, 45, 90, the ratio is 1 to 1 to the square root of 2. Or if you have a 30, 60, 90, the ratio of that is 1 to 2 to the square root of 3. And just remembering sine, cosine, tangent. How about if I just write like SOHCAHTOA? Will that be enough to remind you guys? Okay, so you'll have to use those for maybe like half of the problems in this section where they don't give you enough information. You have to use it to help you calculate something that you need, and then you can calculate the area or perimeter based on that. Okay, so we'll continue, we'll see all of these examples in the ones we're doing. Okay, so almost all of these examples today are going to say find the area and perimeter of the shape, the shaded shape. Notice here for this parallelogram, you have everything you need to find the area, but you don't have everything you need to find perimeter. And usually the questions will be set up like that, kind of like where one of them's really easy to find, and then the other one you have to do some extra work up front to be able to answer the question. So for area, what is the base and the height of the shaded part or of that parallelogram? Okay, the height is 24, and the base is just the part that's shaded. So the base is 23, and the height is 24. So you're just going to multiply those together, and you get 552. What would the units on that for area? Feet squared. So remember, units for area are always square units, square inches, square feet, square miles, whatever. Okay, before I can find perimeter, I need to calculate how long this side is. How would I be able to find the length of that side? What would I have to do first? Using the Pythagorean theorem. So I'm going to set this up as 24 squared plus 7 squared equals x squared. So what is that length? 25 feet. Did anyone recognize that as a Pythagorean triple? How would I find the perimeter of that blue shape? Okay, so I'm adding 25, 25, 23, and 23, and you get 96, and then what would the units for perimeter be? Feet. So perimeter will just be like the singular units, area will be square units. For this next parallelogram, I actually have everything I need if you recognize it for area, because what type of triangle is this? 45, 45, 90. And if you recognize that, how long would this height be? 9, because the ratio of these sides is 1 to 1. So those are just the same. So area is going to be the base. What's the base of that parallelogram? 17 times the height, 9. So 153, and I'll write square yards for the area. Perimeter, you could give the exact answer, and I'm not sure if the answer key is going to have exact answers or if they're going to have rounded. I'm going to say that it's okay if you round it, that's fine. To find the perimeter, you need to find this side here. Okay, so that side, if you know that ratio, is going to be 9 times the square root of 2. You could do Pythagorean theorem if you wanted to. You could use like cosine if you wanted to. You have multiple correct ways of getting that. However, if you're not going to give the exact answer, because that's not the final answer, you want to leave at least 4 numbers on your calculator, or leave all of those decimals on your calculator, because you don't want your final answer to be rounded differently. Okay, so until it's the final answer, even if you're going to round to the tenths place, make sure you carry at least 4 after the decimal until you get to the very end, then you can round to the tenths place. Does that make sense? Okay, so the perimeter, I'm adding 17, 17, 9 times the square root of 2 plus 9 times the square root of 2. Pick up your calculator and make sure you know how to type this into your calculator correctly. What'd you guys get? Okay, when you round to the tenths place, it should be 59.5. Yes, close the parenthesis. If your calculator automatically comes up with a parenthesis there, make sure that you close it. What I did when I typed it on my calculator is I typed in 34 plus 18 radical 2. So then I don't have to type anything after that. I just kind of added the terms up. That would be the exact answer. If you'd like to leave it that way, you could write it as 34 plus 18 radical 2 yards. My guess is that doesn't make as much sense to you in your head as 59.5. Okay? I think most of us would probably rather just look at that 1 decimal than that exact answer. For this one, do you have enough information to find either of them with just what you have? You don't have enough for the perimeter, and you don't have enough for the area. Either way, you need to do some calculations. So we do have enough to do the calculations. Okay, the height is 12 root 3, because that ratio of 1 to 2 to the square root of 3. And then what is that length of that kind of diagonal side? 24. So now it doesn't really matter which one you find first. Let's do area, because that's what we've been doing. So if you want the exact area, what you would do is multiply 12 radical 3 times 32. To get the exact area, just leave the square root of 3 and multiply 12 times 32. You get 384 times the square root of 3, and that would be square meters. So this would be the exact answer. It's okay with me if you'd rather round that, that's fine. When you round it, that would be approximately 665.1, and that's square meters. Yeah. The perimeter, when you're adding up the perimeter, you're adding 32 plus 24, 32 plus 24. This 12 doesn't, you don't have to worry about that. That's just part of, you know, that entire thing that's 32. So you should get 112 meters. You'll like this next one. Do you have everything you need for perimeter?
Yes.
Do you have everything you need for area? Yes. You have everything you need for both of those, so you don't have any extra calculations. Most of the time, though, you're going to have at least one extra calculation that you have to do before you can find, you know, one of the parts. This one's just kind of turned on its side. What's the base and the height for this parallelogram? Okay. So the way that we normally look at things, like we think like the base is on the bottom. The problem with this is you don't have the height this way. However, if you kind of turn your head to the side, what if we say that this is the base? What would the height be? 5. Okay, so it's not necessarily like the base has to be like the bottom side. It's just the base and the height have to be perpendicular to each other. So just look for the two dimensions that are perpendicular to each other. And, you know, remember, like, shapes can, like, rotate around or whatnot. Aaron? Because whoever was the author of this question made a mistake. You're right. I pulled this from the textbook, and whoever made this particular question probably should have made this more like 6 instead of 4. Because you're right, the hypotenuse has to be the longest side. Okay? If it bothers you, let's just go like this, because we haven't even done the question yet. Change that to a 6. If you've already done it, then that's fine. Okay? So the area is going to be what? Okay, 50 square inches. The perimeter, depending on if you used 4 or now 6, would be what? 32 inches or 28 inches if you just use the 4. Okay, just add up all those sides. For these next two, for area of a triangle, let me go ahead and scroll down again. The area for these, make sure that you're taking half of base times height, and make sure that the base and the height are perpendicular. So for this triangle here, what are the two dimensions that are perpendicular to each other? Of the shaded one, yep. 19 would be the base. And then what's the height? What's perpendicular to 19? 30. So you should get the area to be 285, and that's square inches. The perimeter, do you have everything you need for perimeter?
Yeah.
The perimeter of the shaded triangle. Okay? We need to use Pythagorean theorem to find the length of this side. So set this up as 27 squared plus 30 squared equals x squared. because this is not a final answer, let's just go ahead and get into the habit of writing 4 after the decimal place. Or even better yet, just leaving that number on your calculator, and then you can add in the other two sides. So add 19, add 41. The perimeter, when we round to the nearest tenth, would be 100.4, and that's going to be inches. For that next triangle, do you guys have what you need for area or perimeter? No. So we're going to have to use the Pythagorean theorem here again to find these missing sides. I'm going to use this triangle here to find what the height is. When I set this up, I set 6 squared plus x squared equals 13 squared. I think it'd be better for you guys to just do this work on your own. Maybe I'll give you like a couple minutes now. If you're watching this, maybe pause it and try it, and then I'll do this. So you guys should get this height to be the square root of 133. Okay? Leave it in radical form would be my recommendation. Okay? It's okay if you don't. If you don't, though, this is a good example of where you want to make sure you have at least 4 after the decimal place that you're carrying through the problem, because you're going to need to use this answer now to find this part. Okay? So I'll call that y, so I can find the perimeter. The reason why I would think that leaving this in radical form would be better for you is because when you set this up and you take the square root of 133 squared plus 29 squared equals y squared, watch how nice this works out. When you square the square root of 133, what's this number going to be? 133. Okay, and then you can finish this part of the problem. So go ahead and finish finding this and then calculating area and perimeter. And then we'll come back with the answer in just a second. So when you add 133 plus 29 squared, you should get 974 equals y squared. Take the square root of that. Okay? If you want to change this one to a decimal at this point, that's when I would do that. So this is about 31.20, etc. I still have that on my calculator. I'm going to find perimeter because I already have that number on my calculator. So perimeter, I'm adding that with the 29 and then adding that square root of 133. So the perimeter is 71.7 centimeters. Okay? If you didn't get that, I'm going to come around later and help you specifically and find your mistake, because everybody's probably going to have something slightly different. The area is half of 29 times the square root of 133. So that one there you should get, okay, so 167.2, and that's centimeters squared. For the last two, they give you the area. They're asking you to find the variable. So area equals half the base times the height. The area in this case is 52. Equals half the base is b, and the height is b plus 5. They may have questions written out like this in words, where they say stuff like the height is 5 more than the base. You should remember doing lots of questions like that in algebra where you're writing different expressions based on, you know, some math vocabulary like this. So they may have the picture drawn out for you. They may just have like a couple sentences. You can draw the picture out, or you can just know that like 5 more than something you don't know. You would write, you know, that variable plus 5. This is something I need to solve. This is going to end up being a quadratic. here's the way I would go about doing this. I don't like that coefficient of 1/2, so I would multiply each side by 2, just like we did in that last chapter to get rid of that 1/2. So I would change this to rewrite it as 104 equals b squared plus 5b. I would get it to standard form by subtracting 104. And then you can check and see if you can factor it, or you can use quadratic formula. Because I don't know multiples of 504 as quickly as I know multiples of some other numbers, this might be easier to just go ahead and use quadratic formula. If you would like to try to factor it, you can. I think it is factorable. So how about this? I'll give you guys a minute head start. Go ahead and try this one, okay? And then I'll do it up here. Okay, I see a lot of you guys using quadratic formula, so I'll just do that up here too. Negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2 times a. So 5 squared, 25, minus 4 times 1 times negative 104. Is 441. The square root of 441 is 21. So negative 5 plus or minus 21 over 2. I'm not going to worry about subtracting this because a negative number is not going to make sense for that side of that triangle. So negative 5 plus 21 is 16. Divided by 2 is 8. So that makes the base here 8 centimeters. Let's also go ahead and just say what the height is. What would the height of that triangle be? 13. Okay, then if I were you, I would double check that. When you have both of those dimensions, I would just take half of 8 times 13. Make sure you get back to 52. It'd be a good way to double check and make sure that that actually works out. This last one's not quite as tricky because they just give you x and 8. The area formula is base times height. 148 equals 8 times x. So 148 divided by 8 is 18.5.